One thing I've learned from making these Peep Show videos is that there is no definitive best episode. One person's favourite can very easily be someone else's least favourite, which is quite a unique trait for a show to have. Most other shows out there with hardcore fan bases usually have episodes that are widely considered to be the best or the worst. And whilst sure, Peep Show has a couple eps preferred by the majority, I've still never seen divisiveness quite like I have regarding this show. That's why for this video I've compiled 8 episodes, a mix of my personal favourite and some classics, and explore what makes them so great. These are in no particular order, just a big bundle of the best ones. Not only that, but I've also included an episode that, whilst it may fall under some people's favourites, I've made clear a number of times on this channel that I despise it more than any other. But today I want to look at that one from a different perspective. From the perspective of someone that loves it and doesn't think it's shitty. Because life is all about perspectives and putting yourself in other people's shoes. Anyway, let's go.
It's got a bit of a head-on, but I'm sure you'll see to that in a hurry.
As the opener to arguably, but not really, the best series of the entire show, Sophie's Parents really sets the stage for this fear-inducing, anxiety-inducing, freshly squeezed juice-inducing rally that keeps bouncing back to juice like a game of freshly squeezed tennis. I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. The meeting of Sophie's parents really should be a momentous occasion, and this episode really does pull it off. The introducing of Jamie and Penny and Ian, the 3 great characters that do turn up a couple times after this. I know Jamie doesn't, but him and Barney are basically the same person. But despite this, in this one episode, they make such an impact and leave the episode being really well-defined characters. Also, I didn't mention this during my Series 4 review, which you should watch, but this episode does so much to add to Sophie's character as well. Previous to this, we've only really seen her through the rose-tinted glasses of Mark, and seeing her fucked up strange family, I think makes the shift in her character, makes a much more believable pill to swallow. Yeah, Mark and Jez kind of get away scot-free in the end, but I have no trouble buying that, really. But the question of the day is it the best episode of Peep Show? It's definitely one of the contenders. It can absolutely be a lot of people's favourites, but for me, I want the label of the best episode to be, you know, more of a classic, conventional, this is what Peep Show is sort of episode. Saying that though, this episode really excels in the awkward social interactions this show's known for.
Welcome to the Chapman homestead. Great to meet you.
The feeling's mutual. You're obviously very attractive too. What next? Am I going to tell her she's got lovely tits?
Great episode, great start to the best series of the show. Banger.
Hey, Mark! Come and put your tongue up Lindsay's asshole, it's clean!
Jeremy's Broke has always been one of my all-time favourites, but through making Peep Show related content, I'm always surprised by the amount of times someone voices their dislikeness for this episode. It's made me realise the extent to which a fan base, who all love the same thing, really can value different aspects of that thing more or less than others. Recently I watched the Jim Cummings film Thunder Road, and if you've seen the film you know that whilst being very comedic, there are plenty of sad, real, depressing moments. For me, the ability for a film or show to portray something so effectively to where I'm feeling the desired emotion, positive or negative, so strongly, it also makes me feel a sense of appreciation and joy from that. Because wow, this piece of media has made me feel such a strong emotion, you know? But this isn't a universal thing. The next day I told my parents about the film and they shut it off after half an hour because it was too depressing. Some people don't get that feeling of appreciation and joy, as well as the extreme emotional reaction the film or show was intending, the same way others do. Or some people just have more tolerance when it comes to that sort of thing. Some people can get that level of appreciation and joy as well as the strong negative emotions from watching something like Climax. But the first time I watched it, sure, I appreciated it, I thought it was good, but I felt no joy watching it, and I'll probably never watch it again. All this to say, what I love so much about Jeremy's Broke is precisely how well it delivers a soul-crushing, depressing overall vibe, maybe more effectively than any other episode. But I can also see how this aspect makes it other people's least favourite. This episode depicts Mark to be at his rock bottom in terms of his outlook. He's been lower in other aspects of life, but this really is the episode his entire outlook is warped to a depressing degree. It's not been long since the wedding, the biggest humiliation of his life and the culmination of a string of awful decisions he is solely to blame for. Whilst, yes, Saz is taking advantage of Mark, what's even sadder is Mark is completely aware of this, and he willingly debases himself, at his own birthday party nonetheless, to try and use Saz's bad nature and desperation to his advantage. Saz absolutely sucks, but this isn't a story of a man's good nature being abused. It's a man so broken and so eager to gain the approval of a bunch of people who don't even like him, by the way, that he attempts to strike a deal with this woman, which of course makes him look way worse in the process. A clear example of this is the scene where Dobby asks Mark if he wants her to go to his party with him. She helped him get the clip off his fucking lip that he put on himself. She humiliated herself standing up to Jeff on behalf of Mark because he's too cowardly to do it himself. She's literally the only one in his corner, and Mark himself recognises that saying yes to her would be following his heart. And he still, again, for the billionth time, when a series of bad decisions just recently resulted in the worst moment of his life, made another one.
Did the right thing there. Pretty sure. Don't listen to your heart. That's what no one tells you, but that's probably the real grown-up truth.
Sorry, I had to say, this man is fucking mental. After being through literally the worst experience of Mark's life, the best outcome of that would have been that he learned anything from that situation. And he clearly didn't. This is how many episodes after that? Not even a year on. And he learned zilch. God, he's a fucking numpty. He's such a numpty. He's such a numpty. Whilst, yes, the end of this episode is very depressing, it would be a load more depressing if Mark didn't fucking do this to himself. But yeah, a great episode. I love it. Everything with Jez struggling, even being the name of the episode, I kind of like how him becoming homeless and resorting to stealing the credit card from his ex's new lover feels more like a fun, light-hearted adventure compared to Mark's soul-crushing story. Great episode, but I can see how it can maybe be too bleak to be considered the best. Holiday. I'm on holiday now.
Naughty, slutty mummy.
Holiday can definitely be overshadowed by the one that follows it, but it's a great one and absolutely deserves attention. Similar to Sophie's Parents, it's almost always a great episode where Mark and Jez go to a different location. This could be for a number of reasons. You know, when the boys go somewhere different for the duration of an episode, the structure of the episode usually demands a tighter beginning, middle and end, which more often can result in a funnier or more absurd climax, which it definitely does, with Jez munching down on the dog. There's not much I can say about this episode that hasn't been said already, but I do want to touch on a criticism I've heard a lot regarding Holiday, and that being that the ending crosses the line of absurdity for people. I have real trouble understanding this take. What's genius about this plot is how believable everything leading up to the eating of the dog is. At least believable enough from a character like Jez. Sure, he could have thrown the bag in the river or left the dog in the woods, and if he had hindsight, he might have done, but in the moment, I can see why Jez would be too afraid to arise further suspicion from Aurora by hurling a bag into a river that would most likely reveal the floating carcass of a burnt dog. And, you know, we don't know the layout of the woods they're in, how big they are, and what portion of the woods are walking trails. Posters for Mummy are being placed everywhere in the area with a hefty reward, and Jez can't really risk someone finding the dead dog and handing it over, especially seeing as his entire motivation for this episode is sleeping with Aurora, not just getting away with killing the dog. My point is, when I watch the episode, I don't see Jesse and Simon writing convoluted scenes to force an outcome of Jez eating Aurora's dog. I see Jez making believably dumb Jez decision after believably dumb Jez decision, resulting in him being in a situation to where eating a dead dog in front of its owner is the most sensible thing he can do. And I think that's genius writing. The side characters are all great, setting, structure, pacing. The earlier scene of Mark and Sophie's couple counselling is hilarious. Great episode, but not the best.
There's no name for this situation, it's so unusual.
Now we're going to switch from big, vast, on-location episodes to a nice, delicious, refreshing, bottle episode. This one's probably the most divisive on my list of best episodes. It's some people's favourite and some people's least favourite. And I do have trouble figuring out why people hate it so much. I can see why you would be lukewarm on it. Whereas with Jeremy's Broke, I can see how some people don't value the depressing elements of Peep Show that highly. I don't see how you can be a fan of Peep Show and not value the moments of Mark and Jez just talking that highly, which the majority of this one is.
Because we do need to get out of here quite soon, before the air supply runs out.
What?
Well, in here, the air supply's going to run out sooner or later. Good first kick. Of course, you are going to have to smash it out of the frame, so only about another million more kicks like that and we'll be out.
Fuck you.
Conversations like whether Mark would sleep with Jez if he had to, whatever that means, or the pizza man pushing slices of pizza through the letterbox but the cheese being scraped off by the brush, Jeremy finding the shelving bracket, this is all great stuff. And it's surprising it took this long for Peep Show to deliver a classic bottle episode format with how well it works with these two's dynamic. Netherzone, I think, also does the best job of integrating the Zara-Ben plotline out of all the ones focused on them. Their inclusion actually provides some stakes, and Mark and Jez hiding in their flat towards the end is quite intense. All this being said, this episode definitely contains a couple plot holes that are hard to ignore. The main one being Mark and Jez's combined brain power could definitely come up with some excuses for why they're in the flat to begin with that doesn't make Ben suspicious of Jez. The fact Mark's there as well would definitely help throw Ben off the scent that Zara was cheating with Jez. You know, this really didn't have to be a huge secretive operation. So is Netherzone the best episode of the show? Obviously not, don't be ridiculous.
Well, that's customer service. He called me a prong.
Prong.
I mean, there are episodes within this series that are better. Like, it could possibly be my bias talking, because I love Christmas, but Seasonal Beatings is genuinely a great episode of Peep Show, and if you disagree, you're just a big Scrooge. I guess you could class this one as a bottle episode as well, as it all takes place within Mark and Jez's flat, but what I admire about this one is the semblance of an arc for Mark. A arc, if you will. And it's rare we get any sort of an arc in an episode for this show, but what better time to have one at Christmas time? Mark's parents make their first real appearance here since they changed their faces after Mark's wedding. Something I would have liked was maybe a mention of the wedding at all, even if a small, awkward, subtle one. It's surprising that Mark's parents are so uptight and hard on Mark, but don't once bring up probably the most humiliating day for him and them and everyone involved. Come to think of it, almost no one ever brings up the wedding to Mark apart from Sophie and Jez. Could just be the antisocial British etiquette, but I don't know, just something I've noticed. Not a big deal. I reckon I am kind of biased with this one, because I do very much relate to Jez's jolly and hopeful spirit, wanting Christmas to be perfect, but not in a controlling way like Mark. And I think the relatability I feel towards Jez in this one does add a certain level of comfort when watching it.
Even though I'm looking at the tree, I'm not getting it yet.
Horny.
Christmassy, Mark.
Anyone who doesn't feel the same about Christmas or doesn't celebrate it or has bad memories or trauma associated with it, I can see why they wouldn't get the same enjoyment out of it as I do. To get kind of deep about Mark's arc for a second, the fact he doesn't stand up for Dobby is a shame. I mean, he does a bit, but he's more forced to be honest about their relationship. Because, you know, he goes completely silent after Dan tells Mark to put a muzzle on her. But I do like that he stands up for himself. And for Christmas. I don't know, Mark is most likely incapable of loving anyone, so standing up for another person is sort of a lost cause, but it's nice to see him every now and then respect himself enough to take a stand, especially against his father. You know, Mark is his own worst enemy at the end of the day, and so I like when he defends himself. The dynamic of Mark's family, Jez and Hans, is really enjoyable to watch, and compared to the dynamic of the dinner party guests of the next episode I'm going to talk about, it's fucking laughable.
Yeah.
Right, so I've given my opinions on this piece of dog shit, but today I want to flip the script. I've heard from many people that this is their all-time favourite episode of the show, and today I'm going to give it a chance, as best as I can. It makes me feel sick, but it might be a cathartic experience for me and all involved. You never know. Threeism as a concept, I very much like. It's one that feels classic Peep Show. It was definitely a smart idea to introduce a love interest for Mark as someone we've met before, especially in the final series. It gives an element of reminiscing about the old days of the show without retreading old ground. It's the same character, but she's older, more appropriate for Mark, and her marriage to Angus adds a whole new context. I think the main love for this episode comes from the scene of Mark frantically trying to figure out how to play the upcoming dinner party, and if you don't think about how slightly out of character this is for Mark, watching him lose his mind is very enjoyable to watch. I love you on the eyes, prompting the eyeshadow. I kind of love the weird air humping he does when mocking Jez's problems. Mark's Moroccan pasta and scribbling blue felt tip on a wedge of cheese is a really funny visual. There's a really funny piece of dialogue when Jez asks Angus whether Jesus had a cat. Yeah, I really like that bit.
If you don't know, just say. Well,
there are episodes like Kid Farm or Quantalking 2 where the plot itself isn't all that compelling, but Threeism does contain a lot of good tension and stakes, as well as the perfect setting for this can of worms to be opened. To me, it's mainly the extra characters involved that makes it so bland, because the plot is something, in principle, I'd give over seasonal beatings. There isn't much of a storyline going on there, but the characters involved and the history and tension between them is what makes their dinner conversations so interesting. Joe and Megan, April and Angus, throw Molly in there and we literally have a collection of the most boring characters in the show's history. But is Threeism the best episode of Peep Show? Yeah. Alright, moving on.
Just wish I felt a tiny bit excited. Not like I was marching to the gulag for an undetermined crime.
Of course I was going to include this one. There's a difference between best and favourite, and this falls under the best category, in terms of paying off a series-long build-up absolutely perfectly. I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't like Wedding, who isn't just trying to be a contrarian. If you truly don't like this episode though, I'd honestly be interested to see why, so tell me in the comments. Generally, a story's pretty great when it only gets better as the plot unfolds. With Wedding, every minute is better than the last. Mark, Jez, Nancy and Superhands at the flat being the weakest scene of the episode and the wedding being the strongest. The way this episode constantly ramps up tension exponentially compared to the slow, daunting tone carried throughout the season. There's moments in this episode that makes me cry with laughter every time. Mark calling that man a jizz cock and a piss kidney always gets me. One of the funniest interactions probably in the whole show.
Arsehole. Arsehole. Yep, nice insult.
I mean, this entire section of the episode I love. I find Mark very calmly and self-awaringly losing his mind a lot funnier than how he is in Threeism. Not to keep banging on about it. I mean, I remember watching this episode for the first time with my dad, and I don't think I've heard him laugh as much as when Jez angrily informs Mark he's unable to stop pissing once he's started. I admire the unpredictability of the conclusion to the wedding arc. Whilst something like Holiday is just, what's the worst thing Jez could do right now, this feels like a real, honest, chaotic clamoring from Mark, like he's dangling from a cliff and he's panicking with the choices of pulling himself back up or just accepting his fate and dropping. There's no rhyme or reason to his actions, but in the heat of the moment, it all makes complete sense for his character. I mean, from a writing perspective, you want to punish Mark for all he's done and for getting himself into this hole. Mark doesn't deserve to quietly get married and accept his fate, but he also doesn't deserve to escape the marriage and ultimately get what he wants. So you got to combine the two. The fact that not only is he humiliated in front of most of his friends and family members, and his cowardness and cruelty is exposed for everyone to see, but he also ends up marrying Sophie, the one thing he didn't want to do. It's perfect. In his mind, it was either be hated by everyone or be stuck in a loveless marriage. Mark deserves both, and this episode is perfectly written to make that happen. Best episode, but not my favourite.
Sorry, I'm just so sorry.
Shrooming is my favourite episode of Peep Show, I've decided. Regardless of the weird sense of comfort I gained from this one, maybe from the element of bottleness, mostly being set in the flat but with a bit of the office with Mark to not be too claustrophobic setting wise, I just think every element of this one is perfect. Starting with the plot and the structure, this episode packs so much in, but the pacing is so effective. Every scene is crucial to the story and there's no filler, which is great because the story itself is so strong. Both the boys having opposing goals that directly conflict with each other, but also I like how it's not just Mark having a stick up his bum regarding the shrooms. He even levels with Jez and says he can have his shrooming party, but, you know, Mark is ill and he doesn't want to have to hide away in his room, which is fair enough, which is why what happens to him is so funny. Jez drugging and then detaining Mark for the duration of the episode makes great use of the inner monologue. We get to hear Jez trying to justify his actions in his head, which is hilarious. We get Mark feeling sorry for himself the entire time. The inclusion of Super Hands is great in this one, and he has some really hilarious lines. Really, the inclusion of two of the best side characters, as well as Big Suze, is another reason this episode is so strong. Shrooming to me is Peep Show at its best. Not when it's got a big grand plot line, obscure on-location structure, or, you know, wacky new characters. It uses the fundamentals of Peep Show to the best of its ability. I'd say as well it's the perfect introduction to any new fans of the show. But that's just my opinion. I've definitely left out some of your favourites, so let me know in the comments. I want to apologise ahead of time for not reading your minds and including yours. That was my bad. I won't do it again. Anyway, love you all. I'll see you on the flip side. Goodbye.